Welcome back to ECW 2007, and episode number 47 of CyberSlam begins with a video package looking back at the key moments from the rivalry between Xavier and the rest of the Hustle. Following November to Remember, Xavier dropped Homicide and left the group and has spent the last 2 months being targeted by Sonny Siaki, the Havana Pitbulls and Homicide. Low-Key has largely kept himself to himself, leading both sides to questioning his loyalty. Last week, tensions boiled over between him and the Havana Pitbulls, the show ending with Key storming away from Homicide and the rest of the group. Of course, last month Xavier picked up a win over Homicide, making him tap out in the middle of the ring. He subsequently declared that he was intending to destroy the Hustle. He gets the chance to take another shot as he faces Homicide in a tables match in tonight's main event. Promoting that match, Homicide is seen stood in front of a table with an X sprayed across it signifying Xavier's name. Sonny Siaki is stood behind him as Homicide promises to end this rivalry for good tonight. Homicide doesn't mention tapping out to Xavier last month, instead focusing on Xavier being a backstabber and a snake and betraying the Hustle. He says that Xavier sold the group out because he wanted to be loved and adored and accepted by the same people who've been keeping them down. Tonight, he's going to put Xavier through the table and he's going to keep him down and take him out of ECW for good. We then get the opening match of the night, subpar wrestling and little heat, Balls Mahoney versus Chuck Palumbo. It goes 4 minutes and 47, it's little more than a squash. Mahoney does get some offense in, but a small distraction from Little Guido allows Palumbo to hit the full throttle and pick up the victory. It's an okay performance from Chuck Palumbo, a 50 is pretty decent for what we get from our roster. Balls Mahoney, pretty poor as you'd expect, Andy was off his game. It's a basic opener match that led into the segment, Tony Mamluke running down to confront Chuck Palumbo, the man who helped Little Guido pick up his victory over him last month. Tony wanted a piece of the much bigger competitor, showed great courage, but the two didn't come to blows as Guido took him down from behind. Mamluke was laid out in the ring, with Guido telling him that they were currently 1-for-1 overall and they'd face off one more time 2 weeks from tonight and they'd finally see which one of them was the better man. It's a poor segment, but they will face off 24 hours before the pay-per-view on CyberSlam in 2 weeks' time. When Palumbo and Guido had left the ring and headed up the ramp, Mahoney and Mamluke were both dealing with their individual injuries that were sustained at the hands of Palumbo and Guido. Rhino came down the ramp and pushed Balls Mahoney, who was heading up the ramp, to the side before hitting Mamluke with a gore when he entered the ring. He then threw Mamluke to the outside and took a microphone from ringside. Rhino put over that he has got what he wanted because he has beaten everybody in front of him. He's already beat CM Punk at November to Remember, and he's going to do the exact same thing at Guilty as Charged. Rhino then raised his television championship in the air, saying the ECW is coming to FX next month, and he's bringing the ECW World and Television Championships with him to that show. Rhino struggled when going off script, but it's still an okay segment that does advance the storyline, and we go into what is a better segment, CM Punk responding to Rhino's words. He is with Alice in Danger, who debuted, helping him against Kevin Furtick and neutralising Shelly Martinez, but while the interview is going on, Steve Corino and Paul Burchill confront Alice in Danger. Punk loses focus on Jade's question because what we assume is his girlfriend is being confronted. Well, what the argument is about isn't clear. Corino asks Alison what she's doing involved with somebody like CM Punk. Punk gets himself involved, saying that it's none of Corino's business, which angers the leader of the Extreme Horsemen. Eventually, the two sides go their separate ways, the interview called off, and it's clear that there is still a lot of tension between the two sides. Punk apparently struggling when going off script, Corino doing a masterful job, and despite Punk not doing that well, it's still a very, very good segment as we go into the second match of the night. Tommy Dreamer picking up a much needed win over Elijah Burke in 5 minutes and 42 seconds. He does pretty well, actually, a 51. Again, like Chuck Palumbo, it's a solid mid-card, upper mid-card rating for our roster. He wins with the Dreamer DDT, and after the terrible year that was 2006 for him, the dream that turned into a nightmare, Dreamer picks up a much needed victory. The good feeling doesn't last long, however, as on the outside, Sandman, who had accompanied him to the ring, was attacked by Raven with a steel chair. By the time Dreamer could react, Raven had Sandman set up for a DDT at the top of the ramp and warned that he'd break the Sandman's neck if Tommy Dreamer took another step. Tommy had no choice but to stay where he was, but told Raven that when he got his hands on him, he'd make him pay for everything he has done. Raven didn't take the word seriously, saying, "I'll see you at guilty as charged. Raven then dropped the Sandman anyway, hitting a brutal DDT to the steel stage, heading away as Dreamer ran up to check on his friend. Sandman was stretchered out of the building just 1 week after his ECW return. It appeared that he may be set for a spell on the sidelines yet again. Steve Corino addresses the incident from earlier, and he reveals to viewers who didn't know that Allison Danger is his sister. He really tries to paint CM Punk as the bad guy by saying that Punk knows that she's his sister, and the main issue Corino has is Punk bringing her into this world. He calls ECW a cesspit of vile individuals, but accepts that when he came to ECW, when he joined the company, he understood that. Allison doesn't, and bringing her to ECW shows that CM Punk is a coward. She deserves better than him, and Corino plans to expose the so-called man that she is associating herself with next week. A 63C rating, another good segment from Steve Corino. He is really hitting a bit of momentum at the minute. He's picking up some good wins, and he's doing some very good segments for us. So Corino looking like he's going to have a very good 2007 as we move on to that FX show. We then go into the main event, which only gets a 59D+. That is disappointing. Homicide with an okay 50. That seems to be the average that we're getting tonight. But Xavier, disappointing. I think it's probably because he's not suited to the hardcore matches. This was a tables match, but you would expect better from somebody in the main event regardless of that. Homicide does pick up the victory in 13 minutes and 52. Sonny Siaki at ringside, helping Homicide whenever he could. Xavier fought and fought and fought, but was put through the table, held in place by Siaki, and hit with a frog splash from Homicide. A victory for him, tying them up at 1-1. Xavier there saying that this doesn't suit his style, so hopefully this is just a one-off, a blip. He has done better when he's been in those other two main events. He wrestled Punk and had a good match. He wrestled Homicide and put in a pretty good performance, so hopefully we can play more to his strengths in the future. And after the match, Homicide is rejoined by Sonny Siaki and now the Havana Pitbulls, who stand over Xavier, who has already been put through one table. Sonny Siaki wants revenge of his own, having seen Homicide get his, and goes to get another table from the outside. Sonny Siaki sets up with the Havana Pitbulls to hit an assisted powerbomb that will finish Xavier off completely. This draws the disgust of Joey Styles and Taz. They have been against Xavier. They've basically told Xavier that living by the sword, you die by the sword. But even now, they are beginning to feel sympathy for everything that Xavier has gone through. Before the move could be completed, however, Loki ran down to the ring, standing between Xavier and the table once again. This time, he'd had enough, and when Ricky Reyes confronted him about it, he hit him with a boot to the head. Rocket and Siaki came straight after him, but Loki was quick enough and agile enough to drop them both. Having finally appeared to pick a side, Loki threw the table out of the ring, going face to face with Homicide. Homicide could not believe that another member of the Hustle, his former right-hand man of all people, had turned on the group, but he backed off as Loki stood tall in the ring to end ECW CyberSlam. So it's not the best segment to end the show, but it is a little bit better than we usually get from them. Loki, with his current momentum of major positive, only a mid-carder, but we are completing his turn. It was a complete success. Loki now a babyface along with Xavier. It's quite a drastic change from where they were the biggest heels in the company. We did need faces with Rob Van Dam going out, and that's what gave me this idea. RVD will be back probably sooner than later, but I like the idea of having some fresh faces to go with CM Punk at the top of the card. The show gets a 55C-, so I think that's just on the cusp of D+C-, but it does keep us in that sort of minimum expectation that I have. I never want to go back down to a D+, especially as we go to FX. We have to keep C-rated shows. I did check it. A pretty poor night of in-ring action really, and only a few decent segments, but next week we have Steve Corino and CM Punk in the main event, so I've got no doubt that that show is going to deliver and probably be one of the best episodes of CyberSlam we've done. That is a really strong main event for the show. We really want to continue building momentum and put on some really good shows as we build to that CM Punk versus Rhino, World Champion v TV Champion, winner takes all match, the most important match in ECW since it came back, and with FX looming, finding out who is the true ultimate champion of ECW. We'll find out, of course, at Guilty as Charged.